Hey everyone, welcome to today's deep dive for all you future IAS officers out there. It's going to be a fun one. Today we'll be covering a wide array of current affairs, from science and technology to cultural events and even some international relations.
It's about seeing the connections, like how a material called an aerogel can be used to extract gold from e-waste, or how a tiger's journey across state lines highlights the challenges of conservation.
Exactly. And speaking of challenges, we'll also be taking a look at green deposits, which haven't quite taken off in India yet. Then there's the Panama Canal, a maritime marvel with a fascinating history and strategic importance that continues to this day. But first, let's start with something a bit closer to home, the Rann Utsav.
Ah, the Rann Utsav. Imagine a vast white salt desert transforming into a vibrant cultural hub.
It's a celebration of the region's rich heritage, the music, the dance, the food, the art.
And speaking of art, did you know the Rann of Kutch is divided into the Great Rann and the Little Rann, each with its own unique ecosystem?
Really? Didn't know that. It's amazing how diverse India's landscapes are. Speaking of diversity, let's shift gears to the Simlipal Tiger Reserve.
Home to the magnificent melanistic tigers.
Black tigers, they're so rare and beautiful.
But their survival is threatened by habitat fragmentation, you see, when large habitats are broken up into smaller, isolated patches.
Because of human activities.
Exactly. Things like deforestation and infrastructure development. And this can force tigers to travel longer distances, which increases the risk of human-wildlife conflict.
It's a complex issue, finding that balance between development and conservation.
It is, but it's crucial that we protect these amazing creatures and their habitats.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about something completely different, space docking.
SpaceX, the space docking experiment. It's all about India mastering a critical capability for future space missions.
So imagine two spacecraft hurtling through space at incredible speeds.
28,000 kilometers per hour, to be precise.
And the chaser spacecraft has to approach the target spacecraft with pinpoint accuracy, matching its speed and trajectory perfectly.
And then gently dock with it, forming a secure connection.
It sounds incredibly challenging, like trying to thread a needle while riding a roller coaster.
It is, and it requires sophisticated technology and a deep understanding of orbital mechanics.
It's amazing what ISRO is capable of. Now let's switch gears again and talk about something that's been making waves in the financial world, green deposits.
It's a relatively new concept in India. Essentially, it's about putting your money into deposits that are specifically earmarked to fund environmentally friendly projects.
So like investing in solar farms or wind energy installations.
Exactly. Imagine your savings contributing to a greener future.
That's a great idea. But I've heard that green deposits haven't really taken off in India yet. Why is that?
Well, one of the main reasons is the lack of a clear regulatory framework. There's no standardized definition of what constitutes a green project, which makes it difficult for investors to assess the impact of their deposits.
That makes sense. And are there any concerns about the returns on these investments?
There are some concerns that returns on green deposits might be lower compared to traditional deposit schemes.
It sounds like there's a lot of work to be done to make green deposits more attractive to investors.
Definitely. More awareness and policy support would go a long way.
Speaking of innovation, let's talk about aerogels.
Have you ever heard of frozen smoke?
Frozen smoke, that sounds magical.
It's not magic, but it is pretty amazing. Aerogels are incredibly lightweight and porous materials, like microscopic sponges with a vast surface area.
And what's so special about them?
They're excellent adsorbents, which means they can trap other substances on their surface.
Okay, I'm following. And what does this have to do with e-waste?
Well, researchers in Pune have developed a hybrid aerogel that can efficiently extract gold from e-waste.
So we can literally mine precious metals from our discarded electronics. That's incredible.
It is. It could revolutionize e-waste management and promote a circular economy.
It's a fantastic example of how cutting-edge science can address pressing environmental challenges.
Absolutely. And now let's shift our focus to something on a much grander scale, the Panama Canal.
Ah, yes, the Panama Canal, an engineering marvel that connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans.
It's a 50-mile-long artificial waterway that has shaped global commerce for over a century. Imagine, before the canal, ships had to navigate the treacherous waters around the tip of South America.
Adding thousands of miles and weeks of travel time.
Exactly. The canal revolutionized global trade routes.
But the Panama Canal is more than just an engineering feat. It also has a fascinating history intertwined with U.S. interests and regional power dynamics.
Absolutely. The U.S. played a significant role in the canal's construction in the early 20th century and controlled it for decades.
And this control gave the U.S. considerable strategic leverage in the region,
Right. But in 1999, Panama regained full sovereignty over the canal.
marking a shift in the balance of power.
And it continues to be a strategically important waterway today, handling a massive volume of cargo traffic each year.
It's a vital artery for global trade, and understanding its history and geopolitical significance is crucial for anyone interested in international relations.
It is. And speaking of international relations, let's talk about something that highlights India's growing ambitions in space exploration, the SpaceX mission.
SpaceX. What's that?
It stands for Space Docking Experiment.
Ah, so it's all about space docking.
Precisely. And it's a crucial step towards India's dreams of building its own space station and launching missions to the moon.
That's incredibly ambitious. And what exactly does space docking involve?
Imagine this, you have two spacecraft, the Chaser and the Target, both orbiting Earth at a speed of over 28,000 kilometers per hour.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The Chaser needs to approach the target with pinpoint precision, matching its speed and trajectory, and then it has to gently dock with it, forming a secure connection.
It sounds incredibly complex.
It is. It requires advanced sensors, sophisticated software, and a deep understanding of orbital mechanics.
It's amazing what ISRO is achieving. Now let's shift gears one last time and talk about something that's been in the news lately. The government's efforts to combat those sneaky, dark patterns that lurk in the digital world.
You mean those frustrating design tricks that manipulate us into clicking, buying, or subscribing to things we didn't intend to?
Exactly, like those fake countdown timers that pressure you into making a purchase, or those pre-selected checkboxes that sneakily sign you up for something you don't want.
Those are just a couple of examples. Dark patterns exploit our cognitive biases and psychological vulnerabilities.
And often without us even realizing it.
Right. They're designed to nudge us towards choices that benefit the companies using them, often at the expense of our privacy, time, or money.
So what's being done about this?
Well, the Central Consumer Protection Authority, or CCPA, has identified 13 types of dark patterns commonly used online.
13. Wow, that's a lot.
It is, and they're actively working to curb these practices, issuing guidelines and notices to companies that employ these manipulative tactics.
That's good to hear.
It is. They've also launched 2 innovative apps powered by artificial intelligence, Jago and Jagriti.
And what do these apps do?
They're designed to empower consumers and help them navigate the digital world safely.
How do they do that?
Well, they scan websites and apps for signs of dark patterns, alerting you to potential risks before you fall into their traps. They also provide valuable information on consumer rights and offer a platform for reporting suspected dark patterns directly to the CCPA.
So they're like digital watchdogs protecting us from those sneaky online tactics.
Exactly.
It's great to see technology being used to empower consumers and promote ethical behavior in the digital marketplace. And it's a reminder that we, as consumers, have a role to play in staying informed and making conscious choices online.
Absolutely.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive,
But don't worry, we'll be back soon with part 2.
where we'll explore even more fascinating current affairs topics that are relevant for your UPSC journey.
Exactly, so make sure to tune in for that.
And in the meantime, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like this episode if you found it helpful.
And feel free to leave a comment below if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes.
We always love hearing from you.
We do.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
And we're back for part 2 of our deep dive. Ready to jump into some more current affairs.
Absolutely. Let's get right to it.
Perfect. So let's talk about the process of removing a vice president.
The vice president. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's not something that happens every day, but it's important to understand how it works, right? Especially for those of you aiming for the civil services.
Oh, absolutely. The vice president is the second highest constitutional authority in India, after all, and they also chair the Rajya Sabha.
Exactly. So if there's ever a need to remove a vice president from office, there's a specific procedure outlined in the Constitution. And it's different from how you'd remove, say, the president.
Right. It's not like impeachment.
Not at all. For the vice president, you need a resolution passed by a majority of the Rajya Sabha. And then that resolution needs to be agreed to by the Lok Sabha as well.
So both houses of parliament need to be on board.
Exactly. It's a pretty significant decision.
Yeah, it ensures there's broad support for such a move.
It's all about checks and balances.
Like
right?
that.
Making sure no one person or institution has too much power.
Makes sense.
Now, speaking of checks and balances, how about we shift gears and talk about something that's been in the news lately? The government's efforts to fight back against those dark patterns we see online.
Oh, those sneaky things.
Yeah, those frustrating design tricks that manipulate us into doing things we didn't really want to do online.
Ugh, I know. Like when you accidentally sign up for something because of a pre-checked box or feel pressured to buy because of a fake countdown timer.
Exactly. Those are classic examples of dark patterns. They prey on our psychology.
They really do. They make us click buy or subscribe without even realizing we're being manipulated.
And the worst part is, they're everywhere. But the good news is the government is taking notice.
Oh, good. What are they doing?
Well, the CCPA, the Central Consumer Protection Authority, is on the case.
The CCPA?
Yeah, they've actually identified 13 types of dark patterns that are commonly used online.
13.
Well, yeah, it's a lot. Right. And they're working on curbing these practices by issuing guidelines and even notices to companies that use them.
So they're really cracking down.
They are. And that's not all. They've also launched 2 new apps to help consumers.
Oh, interesting. What kind of apps?
They're called Jago Grahak, Jago, and Jagriti.
Catchy names.
Right. And they're powered by artificial intelligence.
Fancy.
I know. So these apps scan websites and apps for dark patterns and alert you to potential risks, before you fall into any traps.
So like warning signs.
Exactly. And they also have tons of information about your consumer rights.
Candy.
And if you think you've encountered a dark pattern, you can even report it through the app directly to the CCPA.
So it's like having a personal watchdog, making sure no one's trying to trick you online.
Exactly. Now, how about we get back to space for a bit? Remember we were talking about space docking earlier?
Oh, yeah. The SpaceX mission.
Right. Let's dive a little deeper into the science behind it. It's pretty amazing stuff.
It is, isn't it? It's like catching a bullet with another bullet, as they say.
Exactly. So imagine those 2 spacecraft, the Chaser and the Target, both zipping around Earth at super high speeds.
Tens of thousands of kilometers per hour.
Yeah. And the Chaser has to approach the target with incredible precision, like matching its speed and trajectory perfectly.
And then they need to dock gently to create a secure connection.
I can't even imagine how they do it. What are the biggest challenges?
Well, one of the biggest is dealing with the relative motion between the spacecraft.
The relative motion?
Yeah, imagine trying to connect 2 cars speeding down a highway. It's kind of like that.
Oh, wow.
The Chaser needs to match its motion to the target perfectly, and that requires super sophisticated guidance and control systems.
It's like a high-stakes ballet in space.
And on top of that, there's the harsh environment of space itself.
What do you mean?
Well, you've got extreme temperatures, radiation, even tiny meteoroids flying around.
That's a lot to contend with.
It is. So the spacecraft and all their instruments have to be designed to withstand all of that.
It's mind-blowing when you think about it. It's a testament to the ingenuity of all the scientists and engineers involved.
I agree. They make it look easy, but it's incredibly complex stuff.
All right, so how about we take a break from space and head back down to Earth for a bit? We were talking about the Rann Utsav earlier, remember?
Rann Utsav? Oh, yeah, the one in the Rann Utsav.
Right. Let's paint a more vivid picture for our listeners. Imagine a vast, white, salt desert stretching as far as the eye can see.
It's a magical landscape, especially during the monsoon season.
It is. And the Rann Utsav is a celebration of that magical landscape and the culture of the people who call it home.
The Kutchi people.
Yes. It's a chance to experience their vibrant traditions firsthand. The music, the dance, the food, the art.
You can see traditional folk performances, browse incredible handicrafts, even taste authentic Kutchi delicacies.
It sounds like a sensory feast.
It really is. You're surrounded by the sounds of folk music, the rhythmic beats of drums, the beautiful colors of traditional clothes. It's an immersive experience.
And if you're interested in geography and environmental studies, it's also a great opportunity to see a unique ecosystem up close.
Absolutely. The Rann of Kutch is a salt marsh, and it's home to a variety of plants and animals.
Like the Indian wild ass.
Yes. They're endangered, but you can sometimes spot them in the Rann of Kutch.
That's amazing. It's a reminder of how important it is to protect these fragile ecosystems.
It is. We need to strike a balance between development and conservation to ensure these places thrive.
I completely agree. And speaking of striking a balance, how about we shift gears one last time and talk about a topic that's been on a lot of people's minds lately, the whole issue of development versus conservation.
Oh yeah, it's a complex issue, for sure.
It is. We've touched on it a few times already today, but let's focus on the challenges of protecting endangered species like tigers.
India has a huge responsibility there since it's home to over 70% of the world's wild tigers.
That's a lot of tigers, and they face a lot of threats.
They do. Habitat loss is a major one. As human populations grow, the demand for land for agriculture, infrastructure, and industry increases.
And that often leads to encroachment on tiger habitats.
Exactly. It fragments their habitats, reduces their prey, and disrupts their movement patterns.
It's tough because we need development, but we also need to protect these amazing animals.
Right. It's about finding that balance.
And that requires a multi-pronged approach. You need good government policies, community involvement, and a focus on sustainable development.
It's a challenge, but it's one we have to face head on.
Absolutely. We need to make sure these magnificent creatures have a future. All right, welcome back, everyone. For this final part of our deep dive, let's talk about something a bit lighter. Have you ever wondered how those speed guns work? The ones the police use to catch speeding drivers.
Ah, yes. Those are pretty interesting. Not magic, though, despite what some people might think.
So how do they work then? What's the science behind them?
Well, it all comes down to a principle called the Doppler effect. You know that thing where the sound of a siren changes as an ambulance passes by?
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. It gets higher pitched as it comes closer and then lower as it goes away.
Exactly. That's the Doppler effect in action. It's all about how the frequency of waves, whether it's sound or light, changes based on the relative motion between the source and the observer.
So the sound waves from the siren are affected by the movement of the ambulance.
Precisely. As the ambulance approaches, the sound waves are compressed, making the frequency higher and the pitch higher. Then, as it moves away, the waves spread out, lowering the frequency and the pitch.
Okay, I think I get it. But how does that apply to a speed gun? It's not like it's making a siren sound, right?
Right. Instead of sound waves, a speed gun uses radio waves. It sends out a beam of radio waves towards the moving car.
And then what?
Some of those radio waves bounce back to the speed gun, but because the car is moving, the frequency of those reflected waves will be slightly different from the original ones.
So the speed gun can detect that difference in frequency.
Yes. And based on that difference, it can calculate how fast the car is going.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a scientific principle like that can be used in such a practical way.
Absolutely. It shows how science is all around us, even in everyday things like traffic enforcement.
Speaking of things that are all around us, let's circle back to those dark patterns we were discussing earlier. You know those sneaky design tricks that try to manipulate us online?
Oh, yeah, those are everywhere these days. It's like a digital minefield out there.
I know. But the good news is that the government is taking steps to protect consumers.
Oh, good. What are they doing?
Well, the CCPA, the Central Consumer Protection Authority, has launched 2 new apps to help us fight back.
Really? What are they called?
They're called Jago, Grahak, Jogo, and Jagridi.
Okay, so how do they work?
Well, they're powered by artificial intelligence, so they can actually scan websites and apps for dark patterns and alert you to potential risks before you get tricked.
So, like, they're warning you before you click on something you might regret.
Exactly. They're like digital watchdogs protecting you from those manipulative designs.
That's amazing. I'm definitely going to check those out.
You should. They're a great resource for staying safe online. And it's encouraging to see technology being used to empower consumers like this.
It is. It shows that we don't have to be passive victims of these tactics. We can fight back.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive for today. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have. From the science of speed guns to the complexities of space stalking, the challenges of tiger conservation, and the fight against dark patterns online.
It's been a whirlwind tour of current affairs.
It has. But I hope our listeners feel more informed and empowered to engage with these issues.
Me too. Remember, knowledge is power, and staying informed is the first step towards making a difference.
Absolutely. So keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring the world around you.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more deep dives into current affairs. We'll be back soon with more fascinating topics to explore.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Until next time, stay curious.